spotlight. With us today is Mr. Sanjay Roye, who is a presidential awardee, a rare admiral, a veteran, an independent director, a board advisor, executive leadership, personnel with social impact, ESG expert, an author, a sports enthusiast, and a pioneer nuclear submariner. And I'm so happy to welcome you, Sanjay ji, at this member spotlight series. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for accepting the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. So before we deep dive into, understanding your brief journey, let me have a small introduction for the people who are joining us today about a little about what Mentor My Board does. And in today's fast-paced business environments, where productivity, high energy, and clear thinking are essential skills for business and boardroom leaders. These skills enable those leaders to navigate through the complex challenges, drive their organizations forward, inspire their teams to achieve that excellence. At Mentor My Board, we are dedicated to developing these crucial skills in the board leaders, preparing them to serve effectively on the boards and contribute to the organizational success. With our 90 plus experienced mentors who provide personalized guidance, helping boards refining their strategies, applying them in the real world scenarios. MMB facilitates connections between these business leaders and the seasoned board members, creating opportunities for learning through collaboration and networking events and forums. And through these very deep diving insider secret sessions, the targeted webinars that we do, mmb provides a critical solution to these topics, offering the leaders a cutting edge knowledge and tools to stay forward in the latest trends and the best practices in the board governance and leadership. And with that respect, we bring forward our members under the spotlight who share their life experiences and what have their journey been like. And with that in mind, we would love to hear from you, Sanjay ji, about your extensive experience, because you've been as a rare admiral, you've now come into the corporate world. So, how is your experience in overseeing the compliance, the risk management aspects for the high stakes of naval operations? And how can the corporate boards leverage these skills to strengthen their governance framework? Because it's really essential for us as leaders to take those insights from you leaders who have been in the in the defense sector, because we understand strategy comes at the core of your genesis. So please highlight a few of your experience in these sectors.
All right. So, I'll thank you firstly for the introduction. Uh, but I will actually, put more focus on what I have been doing in a very, streamlined manner. And for
Yeah.
a very long, long time, I was involved with nuclear submarines. So, what it basically means is that we ran a global project,
Hmm.
which was valued at more than 2.1 billion US dollars, and it involved a 10-year lease of getting a nuclear submarine from a foreign country. And the entire project, starting from its inception, its deliberations, the contract, the negotiations, and then selecting the team, getting them trained, and then moving to the other country, then going back and taking the submarine from them, accepting the nuclear reactor. Because one of the most important thing in this is that you're licensed to run a nuclear reactor, and the
Hmm.
captain of the boat, captain of the submarine, is actually the person on whose name that country signs a decree saying that we give you the right to run this reactor. So,
Okay.
so there are a lot of international compliance issues. There are a lot of risk issues involved because let's look at it this way: if you travel in a car on a highway and you have
Hmm.
an accident, that accident is only limited to those who were in the vehicle and those who were in the other vehicle and possibly a few bystanders. But when
Right.
you have a crisis on a nuclear submarine, whether it is in harbor or outside in the sea, the ramifications are much more. There are international ramifications because, after all, it is breach of certain regulatory, regulations, whether they
True.
will the AERB regulations or Indian International Atomic Energy Commission regulations, could be our BARC regulations, could be anything. Secondly, you run the risk of contaminating the entire environment, and by that it could be horrific from the point of view as a nuclear, explosion if it is in a city, or it could be horrific from the point of view of entire maritime environment. That means you contaminate the fishes, you contaminate the water which is around it, and it takes years for that to
Yes.
fade slowly.
True.
So there's a lot of accountability. So along with the responsibility and the prominence that comes with such positions, a lot of
Hmm.
accountability comes in. And therefore, most of us who are in this field, we have grown up imbibing a culture of risk assessment, risk identification, and mitigation. And we are very, very sacrosanct of the fact that every compliance has to be met. Every document which says that you must comply with so and so regulations have to be met in toto. So I'll give you an example. For instance, again, you're in a aircraft. Let's say it's an Air India flight. Now, you board the flight, the captain of the aircraft starts the engine, and then while he hears some noise, he calls the air engineer, and they shut down the engine. They quickly see what could be the fault, and they restart and they go off. It doesn't work like that in our case. In our case, even if there's a spurious doubt, like I'll give you an instant. When I was commanding the submarine, and we were in this process of running the nuclear reactor, and there was a spike. There are thousands of sensors. One sensor gave a spike. Now it was immediately reported because that's how it's supposed to be. And thereafter comes your decision making. Whether you ignore that spike because everything thereafter has been absolutely by the book, every reading is perfect, all the thousand sensors are giving you perfect readings, but there was a spike. So now comes the crisis, which is on the leadership. Either the leader follows the book and goes ahead and takes a decision to stop that reactor, or he says, "Acha spike tha," and that's my advice from all my council, my head of departments. That was a spike. It's a spurious one. We can still go ahead with it. So the question of your accountability and your responsibility comes to the fore here. Whether you take the right decision by shutting down that reactor, which I did, or you take the chance of going out to sea with a spurious signal which could not be identified why it happened. So the other thing that I have been very fortunate in the Navy was that they groomed me very well. So across all spheres, whether it was operations, it was projects, it was plans, it was personnel, that is human relation,
True.
HRM in the corporate world, uh, or setting up social impact institutions, children's schools, sustainability, ESG. So I was a part of all of that. And one of my finer moments was, to establish the Gujarat Daman and Diu Naval Area, which is our youngest naval area, covers the whole Gujarat state. It's headquartered in Porbandar, and that we did from 2017 to 20. So
Wow.
both the nuclear submarine project and the Gujarat project are two of my, finest leadership legacies, if I can call them, and I'm largely known for my operational handling and command. So I leave it at that. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm an author. I have 3 books to my name, which are on Amazon. Otherwise, I do have many other books, but they are in the secret classification, so they are not in the open media. Then,
Okay.
of course, I'm a photographer who's published in 54 magazines, kind of
Oh.
only National Geographic, Nat Geo Traveler. My recent photography book actually reached the number 2 on the all-time bestseller list on Amazon. It's called The
Wonderful.
Composition Code. It came out in June. Do buy a copy. It's pricey, but
Congratulations.
it is classy, like I say. So anything that is pricey or anything that is classy got to be pricey. So
Yes.
it's an expensive book, but because it's got about 200 colored photographs, teaching everyone how to compose a photograph. Why, when you
Wonderful.
see a photograph, you like a photograph because actually there is some science behind it, why it appeals to you. Uh, and I'm now ready to answer any of your questions to the best of my abilities. Uh,
Sure.
Obviously, there are no right answers and no wrong answers, and they're just an opinion. And they're an opinion at this point of time, which could obviously change
True.
subsequently. Learn more and we educate ourselves.
So true. And while you were actually mentioning about the nuclear reactor and the spike, I could, think of the Chandrayaan movie that we saw, and the first mission that they planned and it went off, it failed, and then the second one. So I could actually relate to it because we've seen it only in the movies, and you've
Yeah.
kind of lived that life. So I can understand the amount of pressure that you guys would have been into, about the pressure, the right decision making that you make on those spontaneous basis is
Yeah.
something that needs to be learned from you, and that is what we adore from you guys, because we cannot even think of the pressure that you guys would have gone through during that process of taking that decision. So yes, and given your expertise and your experience in overseeing all these risks, all these high stake naval operations, how can corporate boards leverage these skills to strengthen their governance frameworks? Because it is really essential for corporates to take cues from the armed forces when it comes to strategy, when it comes to risk management, risk mitigation, and risk overseeing, and as you mentioned rightly. So how is it that we take cues from and incorporate it in the corporate strategies of the companies?
Okay. So, just as a aside, I'm very fond of saying that, management as a subject has actually evolved from the armed forces. Because if you go back in history, there was nothing called management in the civil street, let's say 3,000
So
years back, 2,000 years back. But there was management, there was a command structure, and there was management always in any of the army of any, king or chieftain or whatever. Uh,
right.
and my other favorite aside is always that, event management has also come from the army, which is the biggest event management, or which is the biggest event that is held in the country. It's the Republic Day Parade.
Is the Republic Day, yeah.
Who manages it? The army.
Oh.
It is the general commanding the Delhi area. Okay,
True.
he is the event manager. So the entire concept of management has actually, from some time, at some stage, moved from the military world onto the corporate world.
This
Similarly,
is really interesting. I've always heard about the corporate strategy which has come
And now,
from the.
and now you look, there are big corporations which have ops centers. Now, what is ops center? It is operations center. It is typically a military, command and control term where
True.
you manage operations. So
Yeah.
that how slowly whatever was there in the military world is seeping into the corporate world, and rightly so. Now,
Yeah.
coming to this question that how can it help? So the most important thing is that we foster a culture of risk awareness in the armed forces. Now, this risk awareness, in a sense, promotes accountability and vigilance, and these are two very important, requirements of being on a board: to be
Hmm.
vigilant and to be accountable for whatever
Hmm.
decisions the board collectively takes.
True.
And therefore, when we have this risk culture in us, we always are proactively identifying risks, and we apply techniques to develop systems that anticipates those risks early, and so that we can, intervene in a timely manner.
Right.
The next step actually is again, which we are very adept at, is crisis management. Because, like I often say, that I am paid to take decisions. Now, those decisions may be right, they may be wrong, but there is no time for complacency. There is no time to, take a democratic view when there is a crisis.
Exactly.
One has to react. Whether that decision is incorrect, that time will tell. But in most cases, those who are, kind of conditioned to take these kind of decisions usually get it right, because there is a very, very good culture of teaching, training, continuously upskilling, imbibing the same things over and over again. We call it work up. Work up in the sense that we work you up to the state that where you are at the highest level of your efficiency. So there is no question that even if you're sleeping, and I remember the time when I was just 22 or 23, and I was the duty officer on a submarine. So on a submarine, that submarine, not the nuclear one, those
Mhm.
submarines are run by batteries. So what do batteries do? Batteries actually evolve hydrogen as they discharge, they give out hydrogen.
Correct.
Now, at certain stage, at certain percentage of the environment, that hydrogen becomes dangerous, and at certain percentage, it's going to be an explosive. So, at 2.5% of your air, if your hydrogen percentage reaches 2.5%, there's an
Hmm.
alarm that goes in the submarine, and you're
Okay.
supposed to then take actions to reduce that percentage back. And at 4%, your submarine will blow. Right.
Oh,
So here I'm sleeping at night. I'm the duty officer. So after about 22, 2300 and all, we take short naps so that we are again, in rotation working. And
correct.
suddenly this light, which is a red light, starts flickering, and there's the alarm which goes. And I
Hmm.
run to the control room, and I knew it is. The moment you hear the sound, you know which sound means what. And you
Correct.
run to the control room and you start taking actions to reduce that. But suppose you're not trained, and suppose you're scared when this alarm comes up at middle of the night. It's just a matter of seconds before it will reach 4%.
Oh,
So crisis management works when people are conditioned to take certain actions because there are robust contingency plans, there are standard operating procedures, there are check off lists, there are a kind of a decision making process which has already been instilled in that particular institution. Then of course one very important thing is that we live in an environment where there's cross functional collaboration. So what that means is that at all times, one department is talking to the other department. In other words, if I put a simile to the corporate world, it means that all stakeholders' perspectives are being considered before we decide on something, except in a crisis. And therefore, it's a kind of an inclusive principle where you take in everybody on board and you listen to everybody, and then you come to certain measures which you then write down and make it a compliance or a risk management document.
true. And I understand that independent director's role is entirely to do so, to bring together all the stakeholders' views, put it
Yeah,
forth to the table, and then kind of take the best decision, which is in favor of both the stakeholders and the organization. Matching up
absolutely.
those decisions. So,
So in
so
theory, what you're saying is absolutely correct, and that is the ideal situation where there is a board which openly invites all kind of suggestions, discussions, uh,
true.
and we hope in time every board becomes like that, because only when you
Exactly.
have an open culture and an inclusive culture and invite all kind of views, would you together work to ensure that the collective interests of all stakeholders are being met.
So
After
true.
all, the independent directors on a board are meant to ensure success for that board, for that company, for all
Exactly.
stakeholders.
Very true, very true. So, as you mentioned that you have authored, a lot of books, right? And there would be, some key compliances, governance documents for the Indian Navy, the nuclear powered assets that you call so. So how can your expertise in those regulatory compliance add value to the corporates where they are navigating through these regulatory environments? Because the regulatory policies in the corporates keep on changing, so they have to adhere to the different norms that come through SEBI, through RBI, and uh, it's constantly evolving process because you cannot kind of make one document and keep it and kind of keep on following the same thing, right? So you have to be really very agile. The way military is known, for their agility and taking that high risk decisions. So how is it that you can relate those concepts here in the corporates?
Yeah, sure. So, like you rightly said, the most important thing is having deep regulatory knowledge. So, if senior, managers and C-level, personnel and
Executives.
the board are not aware of the regulations and the regulatory procedures, then there is a chance that there may be a chance of being in violation of certain regulations. So therefore, insight into stringent multi-layered compliance frameworks are very important. So therefore, everyone who aspires to be on a board must have a fairly decent understanding of the regulatory frameworks under which he's going to work. So, I mean, that is one thing which is absolutely clear, and it is a regulated sector. So when it's a
Exactly.
regulated sector, one must have the knowledge to help others and support each other in a collaborative manner. The other thing that I feel is that we come with, again, in a similar fashion, from the time we are 20 or 21, we have a strategic foresight. We always taught that, you must develop an ability to anticipate changes in the regulations. So we also have regulations, a whole lot of regulations. And
Exactly.
with each new technology that comes in, each new, generation of equipment that comes in, uh, let's say if it's Air Force, a new fighter plane comes in. So the older regulations will all be churned, and they have to now align themselves with this new equipment that they've got, the new technology they have got. And therefore, it is important for us to always anticipate regulatory changes and align corporate strategies uh, in a very proactive manner so that we can mitigate compliance risks. So, so in many ways, we are adept at it, because from the time that we are into the forces, at each stage as we grow up in our levels, we are handling uh, positions where we are anticipating and changing. So many of us get into jobs where our job is to change that regulation. So
True.
so you're on the lookout. You can sense it that, okay, now this thing is coming, so this thing has to be changed. Like, for instance, we have a very simple thing we call navy orders. Navy orders are, for within the armed forces. They are documents which are referred to. So you start all your any communication will start with refer to Navy Order 05 of 2024, and then it will go on to say, in accordance with that Navy order, you should have done this or not done this, or you should do this.
Right.
Now, whenever a new thing comes, that Navy order changes, it undergoes a change. So these are things that so the process where the process of documentation, the process of audit readiness, of operational compliance, we are very used to it. And when we come to the other side, it is just second nature to us. If we don't see any of these things happening, then we feel a little worried, a little concerned. So I feel,
I
therefore, the issues of risk management expertise, the deep regulatory knowledge, the process discipline that we imbibe as regards all the documentations and audit specifications, and the fact that we have the foresight and we're looking forward to those and catching those signs that the changes are going to come, makes us adept at handling these kinds of changes.
Wonderful. So I understand that having commanded multi specialty teams and large workforces in critical operations, what are those key leadership lessons that corporates can learn from your experience in the human management or the human capital management, the performance management of the entire organization, so on and so forth? Because it's really very important to keep them energized, motivated, and at the same time, get the desired results for the corporates. So, what are those key lessons that you take from it?
Yeah. So, during my entire 38 years in the Navy, I must have actually led more than 25,000 people. I must have groomed more than 1,000 officers for various higher level, leadership roles. In fact, I was a instructor at the National Defense Academy also at Kharagpasla, where we have officer cadets in Pune, near Pune. And for me, the most important thing is the person himself. So every person has got his pluses and minuses. And I'll give an example. When I got posted as the navigating officer on one of the submarines, that was my first, job as a specialist navigating officer. And I was given a choice of four uh, persons, saying that you can take one of them. There's something called a navigator's yeoman. He's supposed to be the assistant to the navigating officer. So he does
Okay.
all the documentation. He's the guy who's recording everything when you're going out and doing any operations. So I was given a choice between four people. Three of them were outstanding, and the fourth gentleman, he had something called SNLR. So that was against his name, and SNLR stands for service no longer required. That means you are now on that warning list where you can be sacked. right?
Okay.
So I chose that gentleman who was HNLR to be my navigator's yeoman. And 6 months down the line, we have a system in the Navy that every year we recommend some people for accelerated promotion, and that percentage is just about 2% of the entire crew.
Okay.
6 months later, the same man was standing in front of the second in command of the submarine, and he was recommending him for red recommendation, which means that
Oh,
from being service no longer required, in 6 months, this boy had jumped to become an accelerated promotion candidate. So, the way I look at it, each person is important. Each person has his plus and minus. One has to include him in all your activities. One has to behave with him in a human manner. Now, there's this misconception that in the armed forces we have this strict command and control structure, and therefore, as you see in Indian Bollywood movies, most colonel saabs will have mooch, they will have a dog, they will have a nice looking wife, of course, even I have, but notwithstanding that, and they will be just barking orders. It doesn't work like that. It is not the true the true depiction of how people are in the armed forces. And I always say there is a movie called Das Boot, das Das Boot, boot. So
okay.
that's in German. So the English version is called The Boat.
Okay.
The Boat. So one should see The Boat to realize what actually leadership is, what our life on a submarine is. And of course, it's a 1940s movie based on a U-boat. U-boats were German submarines, and
Mhm.
it's on the life of a U-boat captain who was a war hero for them. And that is our life. That is the life we have lived. We
Okay.
have not lived the the glamorous life as they show on Crimson Tide or something else. We have lived that life, and and therefore it is very important that in human capital management, each person is given his due, and only when he thinks he's part of your team will he you know perform. And for us, each person is a spoke in the wheel, and if one spoke is missing, our wheel will not function with the efficiency that it's supposed to. So for us, it's very important that everyone is on board, and therefore, mission clarity is what we teach our boys. From the junior most person to the senior most, he has to be clear that he understands the mission, the goals, and his role in achieving that goal. Now, this
Very
is where
important.
we differ from larger corporations, where maybe the people at absolute grassroots level are not aware that what is the mission of the company. Here, the strategic mission is also taught to the lowest, in the hierarchy. And if we do this on the other side, then corporates would benefit from clearly defined, aligned objectives, and that reduces the ambiguity and boosts focus on the workforce. Then, of course, very importantly, we have this again, which I'm saying is different from the command and control structure as shown in the movies. We do have a decentralized decision making. Every boy, from the time he becomes an officer, at each level as he grows up, he's accountable for his responsibility. There is no doubts about it. So he
Understood.
has to be responsive, he has to be adaptable, because he's empowered to take those decisions. So even as a 20-year-old, when I was a sub lieutenant, I was empowered to take certain decisions. Like I said about that duty officer thing, what is the duty officer? The duty officer is the captain of the boat, because the captain is not there at that
Right.
time. So he inherits all the responsibilities of the CEO of the company. In other words,
Wonderful.
for,
Yes.
for that one night that he's on board, right? And
Yeah.
similarly, at sea, for those 3 hours or 4 hours that he's on watch, he inherits the entire responsibility and accountability of the captain, because the captain or the CEO is at that point of time not. Uh,
There. Present. True.
so this is very different from the corporate world, because uh, a clear picture of whose responsibility and whose accountability always gets blurred. And of course, the third thing which I feel is the resilience under pressure, because We are always under pressure. Our teams learn to function effectively under stress. They are not breaking apart at that time. They are a cohesive unit. And I think corporates can also cultivate resilience through scenario building training. I'm sure they do it, and a strong culture of support for each other.
Great. I think this was a wealth of information, though I would really love to understand the story. Why did you choose the person with, the service not required one? But sometime later, not today at this forum, and I
A
will
very
definitely.
short answer to that, a
Yeah,
very short
please.
answer to that is that I have always backed the underdog.
Interesting.
That's the thing,
And you've made them high performing people in the organization. Wonderful, amazing. And if I have to ask you quick three key takeaways, or what is it that people listening to this interview series or the insight series from you should take from you? So, quick three learnings from
Yeah.
your journey that you would want to suggest.
So the most important thing is, that there is a commitment to learning. There's a culture where we have a commitment to learning. So we value whatever we are being taught, whatever we learn, and we aspire to be as close to excellence as we can. And
True.
whilst we do it for ourselves, we ensure that everybody who's around us in the team is also benefiting from that kind of a learning curve.
Right.
Then, of course, the fact that we come, I'm not actually pointing anything, but I'm just saying that we are largely people with unquestionable ethics and integrity. So that may be a good thing, may not be a good thing, depending on what kind of board you're joining, what kind of company you're joining.
Yes.
But the fact remains that at least you will expect a honest opinion, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to be a team player. Everybody understands his, responsibilities. So whilst the opinion will be honest, there is always a room to discuss and come collaboratively to a better decision, uh, which is opposite of what I call groupthink complacency. Groupthink complacency is a term where everybody agrees with each other without any discussion,
Correct.
and that can lead to far greater problems in the future. Then, if one person may have had a different opinion, and then a discussion ensued, and thereafter collaboratively they came at a decision. So, two things I've already said. One, that we are committed to learning culture. We have high sense of ethics and integrity. And the third, which I would say, is that obviously we have already talked about it in the first question, is our risk and compliance mechanism, where we are very clear about our responsibilities and accountability, and we don't shy away from.
Yes. Wonderful. I think thank you so much, Sanjay ji, for such an insightful journey of yours that you have shared across. I'm sure many of us do not have a deep dive into the lives of you personal, who are not there in the normal life with us day in, day out. And it takes a lot of courage. I really, really, what do I say, admire, adore everything about you guys that you do for the country. Thank you so much for joining us today in this series of Spotlight, and really loved having this conversation with you.
Same here, and thank you for having me here. And I wish you, Divya ji, and the entire team at Mentor My Board the very best. You all have been doing some fabulous work, and I've seen over the past 1 year how you have grown and the initiatives that are being taken. So, wish you all the best too.
Thank you so much. Honored.